In the ruthless lands near Serpent Creek, a rancher who once had it all watched his life fall apart. His cattle stolen, his ranch burned, and his name dragged through the mud. Broken and desperate, he bought a half-dead horse no one wanted, just to have something in this world that needed him back. But he didn't know that the bag of bones he saved carried a secret worth a king's ransom and a vengeance waiting years to be unleashed. What happened next turned that ruined rancher into a legend, and that forgotten horse into the most feared spirit of the frontier. Watch till the end to uncover the truth. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and if these Western tales make your day a little better, subscribe now, partner. Your support keeps them coming.
The wind, a relentless dry whisper, scraped across the high plains of the territory near Serpent Creek, a lawless scar on the map where the dust was thicker than hope. Here Sam, a rancher whose hands were as calloused as old leather, presided over the vast Thunderhead Range. He wasn't just rich. He was a legend known less for his cattle empire than for his profound, almost spiritual connection to the animals in his care, especially his horses. A shadow still clung to Sam's heart, cast by the untimely loss of his prized stallion, Geronimo. The magnificent animal, a marvel of equine intelligence and grace, had succumbed to a sudden fever. Geronimo had been more than a mount. He had been a confidant, a four-legged extension of Sam's own soul. The silence in the stable was a physical ache. "You keep looking at that empty stall, Sam," observed Maud, Sam's housekeeper, whose eyes held the weary wisdom of the frontier. She loved Sam with a quiet maternal fierceness, and the sight of his deep melancholy pained her. "He's still there, Maud," Sam admitted, his voice rough. "Every time I turn around I expect to see him." Driven by a desperate need to fill the void, Sam decided to attend the infamous Dry Gulch horse auction. He knew, with a certainty that was both comforting and heartbreaking, that he would never find Geronimo's equal. But perhaps, he reasoned, he could find another spirit worth saving. The auction was a raucous, brutal affair, a symphony of hooves, shouts, and avarice. Sam, with his usual sharp discernment, secured two sturdy, well-muscled quarter horses, reliable beasts, destined for the grueling work of the range. But then, as the noise began to subside, his gaze was drawn to the farthest, darkest corner of the corral. Huddled, there was a horse that seemed to have materialized from a shadow. It was painfully thin, its ribs showing like the slats of a broken fence, its coat dull, its head hung low. No one bid on it. The auctioneer passed over it with a sneering dismissal, as if the creature were an offensive stain. The horse was a portrait of utter defeat, a silent plea in a world too loud to hear. A flash of raw, protective anger surged through Sam. "They'll starve him if he stays here," he muttered to himself. He strode forward, interrupting the flow of the next bid. "How much for the bag of bones in the corner?" he asked, his voice cutting through the din. The auctioneer smirked. $50, rancher. "And you'd be throwing away 49 of them." "Done," Sam said, without a flicker of hesitation. He bought the broken horse, a decision born not of logic, but of deep, uncharacteristic compassion. He named the emaciated animal Shade. Back at Thunderhead, Sam threw himself into training the two healthy horses. Shade, however, was relegated to a small, isolated paddock. He was utterly unresponsive, barely moving, simply standing day in and day out, staring at the eastern horizon. Sam's foreman, Jebediah, a man as practical as a fence post, advised selling the useless creature. "He's eaten feed we could give to a horse that earns it, Sam," Jebediah groused, leaning on the corral rail. "That thing's got the spirit of a swamp frog." "There's something in him, Jeb," Sam insisted, but even he was beginning to doubt. Shade was a costly, immobile monument to Sam's soft heart. The frontier, however, is a cruel mistress. The cattle market, volatile as dynamite, imploded. A devastating drought followed, shriveling the grazing land into dust bowls. Sam's once mighty empire began to crumble. He fought to save it, but the debt collectors were as numerous and persistent as the flies. "We have to sell, Sam," Maud whispered one evening, tears marking clean lines in the dust on her cheeks. "It's better than losing everything and going bankrupt." With a heart heavier than granite, Sam sold the Thunderhead Range. The majority of his beloved herd, including the 2 horses he'd bought at Dry Gulch, were sold to cover the ruinous debts. Yet, when it came to Shade, there were no takers. No one wanted a horse that refused to move. "He stays with us then," Sam declared, a flicker of grim humor in his eyes. "Seems even poverty can't separate us." Sam, Maud, and the useless Shade relocated to a tiny dilapidated shack and a patch of scrubland near the forgotten settlement of Winding River. The air here felt smaller, the future narrower. Sam, stripped of his wealth and his purpose, found himself starting over, relying on odd jobs in town to keep them fed. Days bled into weeks in the monotony of the tiny ranch. Sam's spirit was flagging. He would often sit on the porch, nursing a bitter coffee, watching the dawn break. And every single morning, the sight was the same. Shade, standing motionless by the paddock fence, his gaze locked unerringly toward a specific cluster of distant jagged peaks. Not once did his focus waver. It was an unnerving ritual. After days of watching, Sam felt a creeping sense of unease, a strange tug of curiosity overriding his despair. This wasn't the vacant stare of a defeated animal. This was a vigil. One cool, clear morning, Sam approached the gelding. The horse did not flinch, did not acknowledge him. Sam, acting on pure instinct, slipped the bridle over Shade's head and swung onto his back. "All right, old friend," Sam murmured, his breath misting in the cool air. "Show me what you're looking at." To Sam's shock, Shade moved. Not a slow amble, but a purposeful, almost driven walk. The gait was still awkward from his poor condition, but the direction was absolute. Shade carried Sam across the desolate plain for nearly 2 hours, directly toward the peaks. The horse stared at every morning. They finally stopped in an abandoned canyon, an area notorious for its history of dangerous outlaws and lost Red Rock tribal burial grounds. Shade halted abruptly, standing sentinel over a patch of rough, uneven ground beneath a gnarled solitary oak. Sam dismounted. He ran a hand over Shade's neck, the bone feeling fragile beneath the skin. "This is it. Is it, boy?" Following a hunch that felt like a command, Sam knelt and began to scrape away the top layer of sun-baked earth and scattered pebbles. Beneath the dirt, he felt a resistance, not rock, but something unnaturally smooth. He worked faster, his heart hammering against his ribs. A few minutes later, he uncovered a cleverly concealed iron ring trapdoor. The air around Sam grew cold with a sudden, dreadful realization. This wasn't random. This was a secret, a mystery Shade had guarded. He remembered the horse's wretched state at the auction. Was this creature carrying a burden heavier than its own meager weight? Sam pulled the heavy door open. A rush of damp, earthy air, heavy with the scent of age and metal, billowed out. He lit a match and descended into the blackness. The passage was tight, leading into a small subterranean chamber carved deep into the canyon rock. When the match flared, the sight that met Sam's eyes stole his breath. Stacked against the walls were rough-hewn crates, bursting open to reveal a king's ransom. Gold dust shimmered in heavy leather bags. Silver bars glowed dully. Jewels, crudely set in old Spanish lockets, scattered across the floor. This was the legendary lost treasure of the outlaw El Lobo, a fortune Sam thought was a mere campfire story. But the story had another, darker layer, a memory the horse's mind held like a brand. As Sam stood among the treasure, he felt an almost psychic surge of terror and grief. Shade's first owner, a prospecting wanderer named Elias, had found this very vault. Elias had been a kind man, devoted to the then healthy stallion. He had been murdered right outside this entrance by 4 merciless highwaymen who were hunting the treasure. Shade, tethered nearby, had witnessed the brutal confrontation. Elias refusing to reveal the cache's location to the 4 greedy thieves. and then the flash of steel. When the outlaws, enraged by Elias's silence, had turned their attention to the horse, Shade had reared, broken his tether, and galloped into the wilderness, carrying only the terrifying image of his master's betrayal and death. The abuse and neglect that followed had broken his body, but not the memory he carried. As Sam gathered his wits, he heard muffled voices drifting down from the surface, the heavy, coarse accents of men arguing. He extinguished his match, his muscles tensing. They were back, the killers. "I tell you, Rattler, he came back to this canyon," one voice insisted. "I saw him ride in a week ago, just before the storm." "You're a fool, Spike," the second voice growled. "That old coot is dead. We buried him ourselves. Nobody knows this place but us. We'll check the main creek bed one last time." They were close, their footsteps audible on the packed earth above. Sam waited, breathing shallowly, the tension an agonizing knot in his chest. He stayed hidden until the sun was fully risen, and the voices had faded into the distance. With a newfound purpose, Sam hastily stuffed what gold and silver he could manage into his saddlebags. He climbed out, carefully repositioned the trap door, and concealed it perfectly beneath the dirt. As he mounted Shade, Sam leaned down and pressed his face against the horse's neck. "You're no bag of bones, are you, boy? You're a promise keeper." His voice was choked with a sudden rush of love and gratitude. "You're a damn good horse." Sam returned to the small ranch, the weight of the gold in his bags a small ballast against his fear and excitement. He was a rich man again, but this time, the wealth was guarded by a deadly secret and a silent steed. He knew he had to act fast. His first priority was the land. The canyon where the treasure lay was part of a sprawling, desolate tract owned by the county, abandoned, untaxed, and forgotten. Sam visited the dusty, indifferent county registrar in Winding River and claiming he needed a secluded spot for a few horses he planned to buy, purchased the entire tract for a ridiculously small sum of back taxes and filing fees. The land, which contained El Lobo's fortune, was now legally his. The purchase created a ripple. The news eventually reached the four outlaws, a gang known as the Canyon Dogs, who operated out of a squalid saloon near the territory line. Two of them, Spike and a brute named Vulture, rode directly to Sam's small ranch. "Rancher," Spike snarled, leaning out of his saddle, a coiled whip dangling menacingly from his hand. "We hear you bought some worthless land out by the peaks." Sam, standing on his porch, Shade tied patiently nearby, met the man's eyes without flinching. "I bought it fair and square. What's it to you?" "Sell it back," Vulture demanded, his voice a gravelly rumble. $100. It's a good deal for that scrap. We need it for a private operation." $100 for a fortune in gold. The audacity was almost comical. "Not interested," Sam said flatly. "I like my property." Spike's eyes narrowed, the chill of malice hardening his gaze. "You best think twice, old man. That land belonged to men who don't take kindly to strangers poking their noses where they don't belong. Threaten me again on my own property and I'll send you back to town with a limp," Sam retorted, his hand resting casually near the old Navy revolver he wore. The rancher's eyes, usually kind, were now cold and unforgiving, honed by grief and the taste of sudden life or death suspense. The two men spat curses and rode off, the air vibrating with their venom. The next day, as the sun began its descent, the four Canyon Dogs, Spike, Vulture, Rattler, and their leader, a ruthless killer named Stone, rode up to Sam's small ranch. This was not a negotiation. It was an ambush. They dismounted swiftly, 6 guns drawn, the metallic click of hammers being pulled back sounding like death knells. "No more talk, rancher," Stone's voice cut through the stillness. "We'll take the land and your life." Suddenly Shade, who had been lazily grazing, came alive. The fear and exhaustion that had cloaked him for months seemed to shed like a useless skin. He reared back, his massive hooves clawing the air, his eyes blazing with a wild, desperate light. The memory of Elias's murder, the desire for his first master's revenge, flooding his animal soul. With a sound like a thunderclap, the horse charged the thieves. He was a force of nature, a silent lightning-fast projectile. Shade slammed into Vulture, the powerful impact knocking the man off his feet, his gun flying into the dirt. Taken completely by surprise, the outlaws scattered. Sam seized the advantage. He ripped his old revolver from his holster. Bang! Spike dropped, clutching a bloody shoulder, his face a mask of shock and pain. Sam didn't pause. He spun toward Rattler, who was attempting to draw a bead on Shade. The horse, however, was already upon him. Shade's teeth clamped down on the man's arm, ripping his attention away from Sam. Bang! Bang! Sam fired twice. Rattler stumbled backward, collapsing into the dust. The fight was brutally, unexpectedly short. Stone, the leader, saw his gang dismantled in seconds by a lone rancher and a seemingly broken horse. Fear, cold and sudden, paralyzed him. He watched as Sam, his face a mask of grim determination, leveled the smoking gun at him. "This is for Elias," Sam said simply, pulling the trigger. Stone fell, his gun unfired. Only Vulture, wounded and terrified, managed to scramble onto his horse. He galloped away, a figure of pathetic defeat shrinking into the twilight. He never returned to Serpent Creek or any other part of the territory for that matter. In the sudden ringing silence, Sam stood over the bodies, with smoke from his gun drifting on the cooling air. He felt a profound release, not of violence, but of justice. He looked at Shade. The horse was breathing heavily, his coat slick with sweat, but he was alive, and the vacant defeat was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep, intelligent fire. "We did it, partner," Sam whispered, walking over to embrace the mighty horse. "We laid the ghosts to rest. The gold of El Lobo, guarded for years by a loyal, broken heart, was finally claimed." Sam, with the fortune he now possessed, returned to the land of his former glory, but with a new wisdom. He did not simply rebuild Thunderhead Range. He constructed a vast new empire, 4 times the size of the old one, complete with a massive palatial stable, where Shade, the silent steed of Serpent Creek, would live out his days as a revered, cherished companion. Sam, the rancher who had lost everything but his compassion, found his way back to happiness, richer not just in gold, but in the unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of loss, love, and suspenseful revenge, living out his days in peace on the wide open frontier.
If you enjoy our Western stories, consider subscribing. It really helps us keep creating more for you.